Welcome, everyone, and thanks for being with me this next hour. You're listening to Everyday Astrology with C.A. Brooks here on 1-2 Radio, where we are also simulcasting on my YouTube channel, which has the same name as the show, Everyday Astrology with C.A. Brooks. Please subscribe if this is something that you're regularly interested in. We are changing our world, our perceptions, our interpretations by just thinking through some of the things that we talk about on the show. And today, this is March 3rd, 2026. And I'm particularly glad to see that people are here. Thanks for coming into the chat room over on YouTube. Welcome. It's good to see you all. And I say that because of the eclipse last night. I know for me, it was happening like between about 3 and 4:30 in the morning. And I had decided I'm not going to set my alarm because, of course, I have a full day of work to do today. And I thought, that's probably not a great idea to go on no sleep. But I thought, well, if I wake up, I'm going to look. So I went out about 1 o'clock just to see if there was any beginning. And there wasn't, not quite yet, even though it was a beautiful, beautiful evening, clear sky, which the night before it hadn't been. So I was a little concerned about that. But anyway, so then I did go to bed and I didn't wake back up again until about, I think, 4:30. And so I kind of looked out, and by then, of course, the moon was just big and beautiful. So I thought, okay, I missed it. But for those of you who watched it, I'm sure it was spectacular. And by the way, that was the last total lunar eclipse until the end of 2028. I didn't realize that it was going to be that long before we see one of those again. So in any case, I hope that you caught it, and if you did, but we're going to talk about it today more from an astrological point of view. But thanks for those of you who maybe are a little sleepy this morning because you did get up and watch that. Thanks for joining me. So on today's show, we're going to also look at Mars in Pisces. That happened yesterday. Mars moved into Pisces. We're also going to take a look at Venus in Aries, which is going to happen on Friday, March 6th. And of course, we're going to touch base with that full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo this morning. And I always want to shout out to Mark's Power Peak, which you can find a link to that digital newsletter, electronic newsletter on 12listen.com, or you can go to 12 House, or, just Google Mark's Power Peak, because that is something you can subscribe for free. And when you do, there's a number of articles that comes out every Saturday night. The article that I write is called The Week Ahead, and it's going to tell you, where's the moon? What are some of the significant things that are going on with the planets? So if you're interested in astrology, or if you're interested in tarot and I Ching and feng shui and numerology and any kind of metaphysics and spirituality, you're going to find a number of articles in Mark's Power Peak that might be interesting to you. So please check that out. And also, I know that, we kind of speed talk through this show. I really try to slow it down, but it's a little difficult for me. I'm kind of a speed talker. So, there's going to be details in the Power Peak that I'm not going to mention on the show, or I'm going to go by them so fast. So I tell you, this is the truth. I often go back and reread those dailies because even for me, it's like trying to stay in the moment. Okay, what's going on today? And what did I say? What were my impressions? And that's it. For every single day, I'm sitting with that information and trying to get psychic impressions about what the day is going to be, because there's any number of interpretations of the astrology, but there may be some particular thing that comes to me. And often I do see what I call visions. I see things very physically. So I see these visions of things that are going on. In fact, for Thursday, we're going to have the sun trine Jupiter. And instantly when I saw that, I thought, okay, don't go outside in your bathrobe, make sure that, don't be seen accidentally, because that's a day when there's a lot of special lucky energy going on. And I thought for a number of people, people, there may just be this wonderful opportunity and they're going, why didn't I get dressed? Why didn't I kind of show up in my best? That kind of thing. But instantly I just saw that. Don't go out in your bathroom on Thursday morning to get the newspaper or whatever. You just look like you're ready for the world on that day. So in any case, I kind of weave those ideas into my article when I write it. So that's why when you read it, you may kind of look at it and go, well, where does she get that from astrology? Well, it's all not coming from astrology, but for the most part, I am an astrologer and I love it. So that's what we're going to talk about. So this week, the week of March 2nd, it's another busy week at the Cosmic Dance. And there's a part of me that I think, oh, I wish I could quit saying that. But you know what? We live in really interesting times and there's a lot going on. And astrologically speaking, maybe there just aren't that many weeks. If you're looking at relationships between planets, there's almost always a lot going on. Now, some of them are maybe more significant than others, but lots of stuff going on. So this week, I'd say generally, if you want to know what's the theme, it's about relationships. And they're really in the spotlight because there's a number of different interactions going on with the planets that all kind of point back to relationships, personal relationships, intimate relationships, business partnerships, friends, family, etc. Now, in some ways, I'd say that's kind of just obvious. I mean, that's what makes the world go round, so to speak. Relationships are a very big part of our life. I mean, how do we get along without them? So in some ways, it's what I call intuitively obvious relationships. But this week, it's more like right front and center. And the reason I say that is because two personal planets, the ones that we associate with love and romance and intimacy, sexuality, well, and relationships in general, they're changing signs. So, of course, I'm talking about Mars and Venus, what I call the cosmic soulmates. And so we're going to give them each some attention during the show. But the other reason I think this is such a week to focus on relationships is because Venus, which is the planet that we associate with relationships and our ability to connect with other people and how we connect with them, what we find attractive, who we want to associate with and why. Well, she's making some very important connections this week. And while she's still in Pisces, before she moves into Aries on Wednesday, she is going to make a connection to Uranus. Uranus is that planet of individuality. It's a planet of innovation and spontaneity. Well, to me, when she makes that very positive sextile with Uranus on Wednesday, it's kind of like her last act or her curtain call while she's in Pisces. But once again, whenever Venus is doing something, if you are interested in a relationship, let's say you don't have an intimate relationship and you want one, or just even the relationships that you have in your life, Uranus is going to bring a spark. It's going to bring something unexpected to that relationship, maybe something that you didn't see, and then you get to figure out what you're going to do with it. And on Friday, of course, is when Venus actually changes signs. So that's important. But then if you've been listening to this show or you know some astrology, guess what? Venus is going to connect with Neptune and Saturn because they're both in Aries. And a week or two ago, we've been talking about the idea that Saturn and Neptune came together. They were conjunct. It means from our perception on planet Earth, it looks like they're sitting in the same spot. They were at the same astrological degree. Well, whenever planets do that, it's like a new moon. It's the beginning of a new cycle. So for Venus, this is a brand new cycle that lasts about a year or so with Neptune, and a brand new cycle that starts with Saturn that lasts about a year or so, because that's how long it'll take her to get back to being in a conjunction with those two planets. So to me, I'm looking at that, and I'll tell you, I'm a big fan, truthfully, of Venus and Saturn. even though a lot of astrologers don't like those two planets together because, it's like, oh, Saturn's a disciplinarian, he's the organizer, he's the limiting and structure person, and Venus is more, that loving attraction and, whatever. And people don't like it. But the reason I like it is because I think it's about commitment. It's about making agreements with people and sticking to them. So if somebody wants a relationship or they're taking a relationship seriously, they're going to want to see Saturn involved in that. At least that's my opinion. So I like seeing those two together. However, what that means is we may all of a sudden feel pretty serious about a relationship. And for good or for bad, we may go, you know what? This isn't working out for me. This isn't what I wanted. And I do want to start a brand new cycle with Saturn and Venus together. And so maybe I'm going to break off a relationship, or maybe I'm really going to look into how this can be revised or changed. Or maybe I'm going to begin a relationship. Maybe I've been kind of playing with this, but I haven't done anything about it. And so when those two get together, we may be thinking a lot more seriously about a relationship in our life and how to forge, a new path together with somebody or maybe with something. I mean, it doesn't have to be a person. It could be an idea that you have. It could be, a mission that you want to go on, so to speak, something that you want to try out, something that you want to get into your life, a skill you want to develop, those sort of things. And of course, Saturn with Neptune, or I mean, not Saturn with Neptune, but yeah, there it is. Venus sitting with Neptune is very idealistic, very dreamy. So, I'm liking that combination coming up this next weekend on Saturday and Sunday when Venus is in Aries and she's sitting there with Neptune and Saturn. I think this is a time that we may look back on and say, what was started at this time? And so be conscious of it. Don't be worried about it. Just be conscious of what's going on. But let's start off and let's give a little more attention to that Virgo full moon total lunar eclipse that happened this morning. And then we'll move back on to Venus towards the end of the show. But, and here again, I'm sure it was beautiful. I'm really looking forward to seeing pictures of it because I bet it was incredible. But think about full moons and lunar eclipses. Both of them are associated with energy building up to a climax. We've developed a project, we've started a relationship, we've got something going. And then the full moon in all that light says, okay, this is what it's looking like. This is where you're at. And so we get a chance. It is moonlight, not sunlight, but we get the chance to take a full look at what's going on in our lives. So that's why they're associated with revelations and insights and aha moments. Now, that's true of every full moon, but especially when it's a lunar eclipse, because it's as if new information comes to light. We see something we didn't see before. We understand something that we didn't understand in a certain context. And so in some ways, maybe we feel more emotionally empowered. Maybe psychologically we feel bolder and want to make a decision or act on something. And oftentimes we find that this energy will extend for quite a period of time, but especially in the next few weeks. But you may find it extending even further than that. So once again, what I like to just do is note, what's going on at this time and just see how it develops. Because like a lot of astrology, I see things retrospectively. Like when I'm working with somebody and I know they've met somebody really important, I'll say, well, when did you actually meet that person? When was the first contact? And it's interesting to see the alignment of the planets when it first happened. And oftentimes we don't even know that it was special at the time. Now, many times we will, but sometimes we don't. So I just like to pay attention, to those eclipses, or to here again, when Venus gets together with Saturn and Neptune, what's going on? And I think what happens is that then, based on what's going on now, we may find ourselves wanting to act on something, make a decision. Maybe we've been really indecisive. Now we want to make a decision. And I think it's likely to be an outgrowth of a desire to take more action, take more responsibility in our lives for interpretations of our experiences and how we're weaving that information together. Now, specifically, I know you hear me say that a lot, take responsibility for our lives. I mean, that is definitely my mantra. I just think, I mean, it's a very important thing to me. So I apologize if you feel like you hear that every single week many times, but it's my mantra. It's at least it's one of them. But I'm saying it this week because Virgo, that full moon last night was in Virgo, and the moon still is in Virgo until it moves on, I think tomorrow. Yep. Anyway, Virgo is ruled by Mercury. That's a planet of thinking. It's a mental planet. Now, Virgo or Mercury is actually retrograde right now in Pisces. So it could take a little more time than usual to come to some of those realizations or to come to kind of a full understanding of something. But that Virgo, she's self-determined. She knows what she wants to do. And it is the sign both of kind of privacy and self-determination and the sign of being in service. So, kind of a dual energy there. However, the reason I'm also stressing relationships with the lunar eclipse is because both the moon and the sun are in a positive relationship to Jupiter. And Jupiter's a planet of benefit and luck and abundance. And Jupiter right now is in the family sign of Cancer. So when I looked at that, that full moon, that was really the first thing I saw. That's one of the most dominant characteristics in terms of what the moon and the sun were doing during the eclipse, during that full moon, is they were making those positive connections to Jupiter. Now, the moon moves a little bit quicker, so its perfect sextile is with Jupiter. That happened this morning. It's going to take the sun until Thursday, March 5th, until it makes the perfect trine with Jupiter. So here again, they're in range. They're just not quite perfect. But that's why Thursday is important with that sun making that perfect trine with Jupiter. And here again, because Jupiter is really activating the sign of Cancer, it's about home, it's about family, partnerships, how we deal in groups, how we see our tribe, how we relate to our ancestors and our soul group. But one of the things that came to me is I felt like there are some people who are really dealing with losses or hurts or resentments right now. And they're, again, maybe having to do with family or having to do with history. Here again, ancestors. And it's important right now, I think, with that lunar eclipse, coming into that full understanding with Jupiter in alignment there, to try to see what's not under your control. There are so many things in our families. There's so many things in, our groups at work or our groups in the world, our neighbors, whatever it is. We can't control it. And so just accept what you cannot change and resist the temptation to ignore what you're seeing or feeling. So there again, if you're upset, if you've been hurt, if there's a resentment, just take it out and look at it. You don't even have to do anything about it, but try not to go into denial, because denial is such an impediment to both seeing clearly your own behavior and your own feelings, but also in healing. You can't heal something that you don't even know you're holding on to. So I think, here again with Virgo energy, it's about acting boldly and decisively when you're operating in your domain of experience and expertise. Now, that's kind of a mouthful, but what I'm saying is Virgo energy tends to be the teacher, the mentor, the midwife, and expert parts of ourselves. Remember, Virgo works really hard to master things. And so this is the energy of just saying, when I'm operating in the domain of my experience and expertise, I am the teacher, the mentor, and the midwife. Now, maybe not in other places, but when I'm in the area that I really know well, then I can do my part with confidence and grace. So there again, there could be something where you really figure, I really want to step up. I want to step up because, this is something I know. I could show other people how to do this. I could be the teacher, or I could, here again, be the midwife and teach them how to bring something new into their life. So that's one of the interesting, I think, outcomes of this particular, eclipse and full moon is that I think we're looking at those roles in families and in groups and we're going to more clearly define what is the role that we want to take. Now, we may say, I want to step back from those responsibilities. But I just think we're really looking at our roles in groups and considering what is our responsibility? What do we want to do? Do we want to do some of the leadership? Do we want to be mentoring, or do we want to take a step back? So if those are some of the things that you're thinking about, you're right in tune, I think, with the planets. All right, so let's move on to Mars. Now, Mars entered Pisces yesterday, Monday, March 2nd. And who is Mars? Mars is that planet that is about motivation. Why do I get up in the morning? Why do I do anything that I do? Look to Mars, because the sign that Mars is in your natal chart is going to give you a lot of clues to like what gets you going. Why do you do what you do? It's a planet of inspiration, a planet of action, desire, and energy. Literally, Mars will show us how much energy we have, or how we pace that energy in our lives. It's also the physical side of relationships. So, for instance, sensuality and sexuality is a function of Mars in a personal relationship. Now, often I refer to Mars as the in your face planet. Now, what I mean by that is forever, this was certainly true when I first started studying astrology, but it still is. Oftentimes, if I start off and say, hey, what's going on for you? The person is going to start talking about the house in their chart, the area of their lives where Mars is sitting. And by that, I mean transiting. So, if you find Pisces in your chart, that's likely where some things are going on. Because remember, it's a planet of action. So things are happening. There's activity. Our attention is focused there. Now, that's not always true, but a lot of times it truly is. And remember also, Mars changes signs about every 6 weeks. It takes about 2.5 years for Mars to go all the way around and make the complete cycle or the complete circuit of all the astrological signs. So Mars hasn't been in Pisces for 2.5 years. So now this isn't the same thing, as Saturn and some of the others, that take a lot longer in certain areas. But Mars, every 6 weeks he's going to change, but it's going to take him a while to get around. So the other thing about Mars in Pisces, well, there's a lot of other things that we could talk about, but this is a ball of fire, right? It's action. He's the warrior. He's the soldier, the knight in search of the Holy Grail. And what is he doing? He's diving into the ocean of Pisces. This is the planet that represents action and physical vitality. But now we're finding him in a sign that can be introverted for sure, sometimes passive, and very contemplative, right? Because remember, Pisces is ruled by Neptune, the planet of transcendence. Neptune is the planet that says, you know what? The material world is the material world, but I'm somewhere else entirely. I'm dealing with a whole other side of life. I'm dealing with that side of us that knows that we're spiritual beings. We just happen to be wearing bodies right now. So now Mars, this planet that loves to act, is sitting in Pisces, which says, you know what? I want to pay attention to something else. I want to go inside. So when Mars goes into Pisces, now not everybody's going to be the same, but some of the things that can happen is we feel withdrawn or shy or maybe more passive than usual. We're more into, I want to have engagement with peace, not with conflict. So we may have little or no desire to engage in aggressive behavior, or maybe even competition. I mean, maybe we're even finding some of the things that we really love, or, it doesn't mean you're going to give up your exercise or your sports, but you may not have the same attitude. I mean, maybe you usually go to that pickleball court with, I'm going to beat her today, or I'm going to do this, that, and the other thing. And all of a sudden we find it's just not quite as important right now. Or maybe there's this sense of turning the other cheek, because this is a sign that's sensitive and intuitive. very psychic souls, you might think, with Mars in Pisces. And so here again, why? Why is there this switch? Well, Pisces is definitely more interested in the spiritual, the eternal, and the non-material world. So why am I going to get all hot and bothered about, there again, a tennis game or some activity or something going on when it's not going to last? And does it really matter? You might find people being a lot more philosophical because they're looking at what is eternal, what is really important in our lives. I want to put my attention on that. So we're more likely to see conflict as an opportunity to learn forgiveness rather than as a chance to win or a chance to be combative or violent, because we're tuned into other people's feelings and needs more so than usual. And we're more likely to come to the defense of others, especially the disenfranchised, the abused, or the underprivileged. Those maybe who are in a situation that's cruel or who are under some kind of tyranny. It's like we get more in touch with compassion. And by the way, this extends not just to people, but to the natural world, to plants and animals. When Mars in Pisces fights, they fight for the underdog. That's what they're doing. And they may prefer to engage in self development activities. See, here again, no matter who we are, where Mars is in our chart, it could be that all of a sudden, it feels that way anyway, that things like our spirituality, our creative side, anything that's artistic, even movies or music, all of a sudden those things seem more important to us, or they seem more urgent. Or you're saying, you know what, that's what I really want to do right now. I'm not going to be playing as many sports, or I'm backing off because I really want to take that photography class. I really want to go watch all those Oscar winning, or those Oscar nominated movies. I want to get into something that feeds my soul. And here again, some of the people that have Mars in Pisces: Vincent van Gogh, Michelangelo. And if you know the jazz artist Miles Davis, now he's interesting. I don't know his whole history, but he's just iconic in the jazz world. But I think he had some pretty severe issues with addiction. And see, that makes sense with Mars in Pisces also. And I say that because Pisces rules, Neptune, Pisces, they rule alcohol and drugs and the kind of the addictive process. And when you see somebody escaping, it's a gentle soul that is, in a sense, escaping from what they see as the harsh realities of life. So that's typical sometimes with Mars in Pisces, that a person may have some issues with alcohol or drugs, but it's more along the line of, like I said, they're looking for something deeper. They're looking for something more meaningful in their lives, or possibly they're just escaping. But this is a whole different motivation. Once again, Mars, motivation. What are we looking for? And so we aspire a little bit more, maybe, to be a creative genius or to master something on a spiritual level or to really get into our beliefs. Or we start maybe dissecting, what do we really believe and why? What's important? So some of those goals that have to do with like really mastering a sport or building ourselves, going up the corporate ladder and etc. I'm not saying we abandon those things. I'm just saying all of a sudden those seem superficial. They just don't seem as important as something underlying or something going on inside of us. So one of the takeaways of Mars in Pisces is that it's very idealistic. And it's twofold. It's looking for something, is it really that important that I win this game? Is it really this important that I exert myself and assert myself in this situation? And we may still be doing that, but we're asking ourselves, why? Why are we doing that? Why do I think that's important? And speaking of that, I have a quote for you from George Bernard Shaw. Now, this quote, he is not, or by the way, he doesn't have Mars in Pisces, but he was born with Neptune in Pisces. And I'm using the quote because it just seems so accurate. There are those that look at things the way they are and they ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not. Now, if that sounds really familiar, it's because that quote was used, or something very close to it, was used in a political speech by Robert Kennedy. And I'm speaking of the one that was the brother of President Kennedy, the one born in 1925. He paraphrased this or used that quote or something very similar to it in a speech. So often that quote is attributed to him. So when you hear it, there are those that look at things the way they are and ask why. I dream and say, why not? But that is so Mars in Pisces, even though, like I said, neither of these people had Mars in Pisces. However, Robert Kennedy, when I look at his chart, he does have 3 planets in the water sign Scorpio. So once again, water is intuitive. I'm not going to say gentle, but it's intuitive. It's psychic. It's looking for something underneath. It's looking for the spiritual foundation. And Robert Kennedy had Sun, Mars, and Saturn in Scorpio. But here's what's important too. His Sun and Saturn were in a very strong trine connection to a planet in Pisces. And that planet in Pisces is Uranus. And when I looked at his chart, I realized he then has multiple planets in his chart that are all connecting to his Uranus in Pisces. So once again, I'm not building the case for Mars in Pisces here, but just that idea that Pisces in his particular chart was fairly active and important and a ringleader because so many other planets were connecting to Uranus in Pisces. So yeah, his Mars was different, and you'll see that with people too. It's almost like you feel the conflict between the way they act and maybe the way they really feel or think in their hearts. But in this case, that Pisces was very, very important because that Uranus really was in connection to many planets in his particular chart. So I wanted to include that quote. So Mars in Pisces, when it comes to life and relationships, very idealistic. It's looking for a soulmate. That's the important thing too. And the people that come up to mind are Elizabeth Taylor. I mean, she got married what? I want to say she got married 9 times and twice to Richard Burton. But in any case, it's this idea of I want to find this perfection. So Marilyn Monroe also had Mars in Pisces. They're looking for a soulmate. They're looking for the perfect lover. They're looking for their split apart. Now, I'm offering that to you because, especially now, when we're under the influence of Mars and Pisces, and you're looking at your relationships, or you're kind of, going back and forth with something in a relationship, understand that there's this little voice going, is this my soulmate? Is this perfection for me? Is this my split apart? So even in a long-term existing relationship, we may all of a sudden kind of get stars in our eyes, in terms of the way we're looking at it, because there's something within us that wakes up and goes, that's what I want. I just want this perfect relationship. Now, on planet Earth, that rarely happens. So, and I hope I'm not just being a cynic, but I'm saying, that idealism on the spiritual or the metaphysical, level just doesn't play out quite so well once we start adding, the things that happen in life, loading the dishwasher, picking up the laundry, or, whatever, all those everyday things that Pisces can go, oh, why are those important? Pisces can live in a whole nother world, really. And it's like, I say Pisces is the one that forgets to pay the bills, forgets to take care of, basic things, put out the trash or whatever. They forget because they're living in another world, just living in another world. So Mars in Pisces, it can really make your it can put you in this little pink bubble, in terms of your relationships, but you can also become disenchanted because all of a sudden, that's it. You do have the limitations of life on planet Earth. You've got to breathe every few seconds. Your heart has to keep beating. You need food. You need water. These practical things that aren't going to go away, even though you want to be in this little dream world with Mars in Pisces, right? And, I see it as I wrote this in the Power Pink. When you know that you're a sensitive and creative soul, that you're made of stardust, it's really hard to settle for a routine job or a lackluster relationship. You want something else. But here again, we're lucky because Mars comes along, every 2.5 years to Pisces. And it's our chance to kind of remind ourselves that we are sensitive. We are creative geniuses and we are yearning for authentic connections with our spiritual selves and with each other. So, there again, if your relationship is not every single thing you want it to be, well, maybe this is a reminder. How can you be more authentic with your partner? What can you do about that? How can you see them through spiritual eyes instead of like, oh, this is the person that, threw their clothes on the floor? How are you seeing the relationship? But if you feel this sudden wave of nostalgia or sentimentality, or even, boredom, it just might be Mars sailing up beside you and saying, hey, let's do a little internal adventure and self-discovery. But also remember, Mars is the planet of vitality, energy. And when we see it in Pisces, we need to remember, and by the way, it'll be in Pisces through April 9th. Make sure you do attend to those details. Get plenty of sleep. Try not to ignore your body. And, most of you probably have had that experience. I mean, I know I do, where I will get so involved with something and then I literally go, oh my God, all of a sudden I have no energy. And then I start thinking, I go, have you eaten today? No. Have you had anything to drink since you had coffee first thing this morning? No. I mean, I've just gotten so into something, I'm not paying attention. Well, eventually your body is going to go, hey, remember me? So get plenty of sleep. Pay attention to both your body and your soul's needs for sustenance and for downtime. And this is a great time for tuning into what motivates you. What is it that really motivates you? What's the bottom line? And, accept whatever it is. It doesn't have to be somebody else's idea. And it doesn't have to be some highfalutin spiritual ideal. Just say, yeah, this is what turns me on. This is what motivates me. Just be that person. Schedule dedicated time to look within, even if it's for a few minutes every day. Expect vivid dreams and expect hunches and psychic hits because they're going to come with Mars sitting in Pisces. Let your imagination flow and your creative side come out and play. So here again, I think what we can expect, takeaway, expect that you're going to have more clarity about yourself. You're going to be able to look at your attachments and your priorities through a new lens. You're going to recognize internal motivations, desires, and needs. Maybe things that you weren't giving any attention to. You weren't just allowing them there again to kind of come out and play. So I do have a couple of quotes from people who were born with Mars in Pisces. The first one's Michelangelo. Your gifts lie in the place where your values, passions, and strengths meet. Discovering that place is the first step towards sculpting your masterpiece, your life. And see, I love that because he's talking your values, your strengths, your passions. It's like do it because you love it, not because somebody else loves it or because some group says this is the place to be, or not because I say it's the place to be. What are your passions? Mars in Pisces, it gives you the opportunity to go, wow, this is something I love. I've always loved this, or I've always been curious about it. I've always wanted to know about this. So go there with Mars. Okay, the second person I wanted to do a couple of quotes is Tom Hanks. Now, the first one, he says, my wife keeps telling me my worst fault is that I keep things to myself and appear relaxed, but I'm really in a room in my own head and I'm not hearing a thing anyone is saying. Now, that is perfect Pisces. Being in your head, being somewhere inside, and you're just letting the world just go by. So you put on this, you don't even know you're doing it maybe, but you're just putting on this space. Your body's in the room, but you are not. You're someplace else. And so I think that's a perfect quote. But here's the other thing, and it may come a little bit as a surprise, is that Tom Hanks actually has a lot of quotes about being lonely and talks about it. I shouldn't say talks about it quite a bit, but in the public view, there's a lot of quotes he has made about loneliness. He talked, like, one of them is that he thinks all the great stories in literature deal with loneliness. Now, see, that's his take. That's his criteria. That's what he's looking for. And then, but he specifically says, the battles against loneliness that I have fought when I was 16 are very different from those that I fought when I was 27. And those are very different from the ones that I fight at 44. So, see, for him, he sees loneliness as kind of a life pattern, something that's been going on in his life for a long time. He also says there's a difference between solitude and loneliness. I can understand the concept of being a monk for a while. See, very, very Pisces, and maybe especially Mars and Pisces. But, just thinking about that and see, so how does that come out for him? A lot of times, the movies that he makes, being able to integrate not just loners or loneliness, but he integrates that sensitivity, or maybe that's the way he connects with people, the way he walks that path or that road that he considers, I'm alone in here, and he connects through making the movies. I mean, I don't know. I'm just like shooting it out there, but he's not the person that would instantly come to mind as somebody who is lonely, right? But he's got Mars and Pisces, and that's one of the ways that it manifests for him. And no doubt, Pisces rules movies. So the fact that he's an actor and director and producer and does all those things, it's very in tune with his astrology chart. Okay, well, let's jump to Venus and Aries. I realize we're getting a little bit closer than I wanted to the end of our hour. So Venus in Aries, it's going to happen Friday morning very, very early. Now, Venus moves much faster than Mars. So she'll stay in a sign for roughly, let's just say, a month. That's about how long she stays. She is the planet of values and love and romance and relationships. Also, she governs what we find valuable. So that's money, that's resources. And she is going to kind of quietly under the, in the middle of the night, she's going to slip out of Pisces, that sign that Mars just went into, and she's going to go into Aries. Now, I say invisible no more, because this girl's got moxie. This is not the vision of the little woman sitting at home taking care of everything. And of course, she is taking care of her home, because she's taking care of everything. She's taking care of home. She's taking care of business, her life, her relationships. She is taking charge, truly. Aries is the sign of courage. It's the sign of the warrior. And guess what? Mars is the natural ruler of Aries. So this to me is a very interesting juxtaposition, because now Venus, think of them as cosmic soulmates. Mars goes into this very soft, intuitive, introverted space of Pisces. And now his soulmate, Venus, goes into Aries. And it's just like I say, it's very interesting, because it almost feels to me like they make an agreement. Now, they didn't, of course, but it's like Venus has decided to temporarily take over and fill his shoes in Aries. And it may start off slowly, but never doubt it. Venus in Aries, she's got a vision. Now, also, I want to address that there's a widespread belief that Aries is a difficult energy for Venus. And it is true that she rules Libra, which is the opposite of Aries. And she really, and her whole style, Mars goes out and takes what he wants. Venus attracts what she wants. She'd prefer to seduce and attract and magnetize to her what she wants instead of going out and getting it. However, I think this is one of those situations where, if you think of, traditional astrology, you go, oh, poor Venus, she doesn't know how to deal with Aries. Not true. We live in very changing and interesting times. And so those traditional feminine values that you would think, motivate Venus, and I think is true, but I don't think she minds being in Aries at all. She's motivated to be independent. There's a lot of people are going to go, finally, the opportunity to just be who I want to be with no excuses. So I think we see it in the world. Our values have changed, but also, I don't think we have to abide by some of those old ideas of Venus not being happy in Aries. Now, it's not exactly her comfort level if we're going to get very traditional, but she doesn't share those conventional views of femininity and relationships or behavior when she gets into Aries. And remember, too, Aries is associated with a tarot card, the Emperor. And I want you to think about that, because that's exactly what Venus does when she goes into Aries. She takes charge of organizing her life, structuring her life, and not necessarily that she's going to do that, that she's going to be an emperor and be over everybody else. In fact, I think one of the most important factors, or one of the most important outcomes of Venus in Aries, maybe particularly at this time, is it's encouraging us to take charge of ourselves, structuring our own lives. So we may, be acting a little more independent in our relationships. I mean, I think you can expect that. And by the way, Venus is going to be in Aries until March 30th. And I think we can expect our relationships are going to be a little more animated, maybe more exciting, maybe a little more competitive. You may find people really acting a little more independently than usual. They're not looking so much for peace and harmony. They're looking for, being able to take charge of their lives. We're going to see that. And so what happens is, I think, there's almost this infusion. And here again, it happens for everybody. How we deal with it can be very different, but it happens for everybody. We don't want to accept second place in our lives. When it comes to making choices and decisions, we want to be the one who's designing our lives or our path. We want to have the final say. Now, we may consult with a number of people, but we just don't want to think that we don't have control of it. So here again, with that Emperor kind of energy associated with Aries, we want to take the lead. We want to take the reins. We want to structure our lives and our relationships according to our aspirations of what's important. And we want to be inspired. We want, we're kind of looking around for something new and something exciting to kind of give us a spark. So during this time, it's I think what will happen too is we're more upfront and vocal about our priorities and what we want. And when we need to, we'll take the authority and the control to make what we want happen. But now remember, here again, in juxtaposition, Mars is in Pisces. So I'm not saying that's not going to kind of confuse the issue a little bit, but in your heart of hearts, this Venus, when it's like, what do you want? What do you want to attract? Well, you want to be the person who's choosing the pattern. You don't want somebody else choosing how it's going to happen. You want to be a little bit more in charge. And I think I've got some quotes by people that have Venus in Aries, and I think it really kind of elucidates what this energy feels like. This is Queen Victoria, and she actually had Venus in Aries, and it was in a very positive alignment with Uranus. Once again, being able to, stick out from the crowd. And her Uranus was in Sag. But she says, the important thing is not what they think of me, but what I think of them. Now, I don't know who she was referring to, but just think about that. It's not about what they're thinking about me. It's what I think of them. She also said, great events make me quiet and calm. It's only trifles that irritate my nerves. And I think that's very Aries too. Or maybe it's a Uranus saying, you know what? I'm okay with big things. I expect big, important activities in my life. And there again, it has to do with other things in her chart. Here's one from Joan Crawford, Sun and Venus in Aries. Love is a fire, but whether it's going to warm your heart or burn down your house, you can never tell. I think that one's funny. Then here's Lady Gaga. Some women choose to follow men, and some women choose to follow their dreams. If you're wondering which way to go, remember that your career will never wake up and tell you that it doesn't love you anymore. Now, Lady Gaga has Sun and Venus in Aries. She has a moon in Scorpio and Mars in Capricorn. So, I would say, and we know this from her behavior, from her singing, from her whole style, she's not messing around. She's taking charge. Okay, well, we have a couple of minutes. So here again, I just want to touch base. We already did a little bit, but Venus is going to sextile Uranus. So on Wednesday, that I just want to say, greet the day with a smile and put your best foot forward, because this is a connection that can really just love, romance, and other things that we find attractive and value come up. And they come up in surprising packages. It could also be an unexpected windfall blows into our lives, or an interesting person or event comes up and adds a spark to our day. We're just never going to know where love finds us. So here again, I'm saying anticipate something sweet and possibly amusing, and dress for success. Be ready for it. Something's going on that day, and just know that it's kind of a sparkly day that way. Now, there again, even if you go through your day and you go, nothing much happened. Well, maybe nothing does, or maybe you don't know it yet. So just be prepared. Then Thursday, that's when the sun trines Jupiter. We talked about that. One thing I guess I want to leave you with this idea is that this is lucky energy. This is optimistic, cheerful, abundant energy that wants to attract things into its life, wants to make things bigger and increase it. It wants to be abundant and generous. But it is a day, I guess I'd say it this way, it's a day for planting the seeds for good fortune for the future. So don't just look around and say, what is happening for you? Yeah, maybe you don't win the lotto on Wednesday, but are you planting seeds for good fortune in the future? And we do that in many ways. One way is gratitude. We celebrate the good things that are happening in our lives, and we don't get taken down by the few, little things that kind of are irritating us. But the other thing is we do it by prioritizing other people. Can we benefit other people? Can we be kind and tolerant? Can we be the reason that they're hopeful, that they feel like something good is going to happen? There's ways to plant seeds for good fortune for the future. And so think about that. And I think that's a practiced habit. It doesn't just come naturally to a lot of us. So think about that. Are you planting seeds for good fortune for the future? And Marlon Brando had his sun in Aries trine Jupiter, and he said, never surrender to the moment of mediocrity. I thought that is pretty good. So I know that we've covered a lot. Here again, I would refer you back to Mark's Power Beat, and also to the different shows on the YouTube channel. Mark he not only does a weekly show on Monday, he does a 3-minute daily update of whatever's going on. So make sure you subscribe to Mark, and please subscribe to my show too. Heads up, next week, Jupiter moves direct. It moves out of a retrograde cycle that's been going on since November 11th. So I know a lot of people are going to be excited about that. And maybe that's important too, considering it's getting so close and we've got that Jupiter connection this week. So everybody, thank you for joining me. To all the listeners and everybody in the chat room, I've been kind of glancing over at your comments, and I'm so glad you're there. Thank you very much for doing that. Thanks to our producer, Serena. Please stay tuned. Up next is Empowerment with Kelly Whetstone. You can find her on her YouTube channel, Empowerment with Kelly Whetstone. And I'll leave you with this quote. This is Miles Davis, who has Mars in Pisces and, by the way, Venus in Aries. He says, my future starts when I wake up every morning. Every day I find something creative to do with my life. Sometimes it takes you a long time to sound like yourself. This is CA signing out. You can find me for personal sessions on 12listen.com. Please feel free to request a schedule call at a time that's good for you, or just find me when I'm online, usually in the afternoons. You have been listening to Everyday Astrology with CA Brooks on 12 Radio and streaming on YouTube, where we are changing the way that we listen to the planets and to the world.